If you list Buffalo number one still after losing to the Jets this past week, oh, you will get crushed by yours truly right here on Birds 365. You got your MAGA Mac guys, John McMullen and Jody McDonald here with you on Birds 365. We got an entire week to talk about the Eagles and not have to worry about a game because they don't play till Monday night against the Commanders. Come to town with Taylor Heineke at the helm instead of Carson Wentz. Is there any chance Carson Wentz is going to be healthy enough? Did they put him on IR?
Shame he's on IR. He's on IR. He can't.
So there is no chance he's going to play
against
the Eagles next Monday. All right, fair enough. And John's a little bit more concerned with the Washington defensive front. They're good, and I know Chase Young has the possibility they activated his 21-day window, so he's practicing now. We won't know if he's going to be activated. Maybe he comes in here as a 3-sack day, or maybe he comes in here and is a complete non-factor. I would say there's a better chance of the latter than the former because he didn't play all that well last year. He was phenomenal at Ohio State, made him the number 2 pick in the draft, came in house on fire in the NFL his rookie year. He did very little last year prior to getting hurt, and now has been recovering ever since. I don't think he's just going to jump into the fray and become some kind of game wrecker, but the Commanders are not scaring me much going into next week. But we're almost halfway through the season. And J-Mac, I wanted to run this by you because I was doing some number crunch, and it just dawned on me about the Eagles and what they've done through the first 8 games that both you and I agree have them as the best team in the National Football League. All those power rankings will come out tomorrow. Sorry, Bills fans, you can't be number one. If there's and you know I get too worked up about this stuff. If there is a media outlet that still has Buffalo as number one, I gave them a quasi pass these last couple of weeks when they've had the Bills ahead of the Eagles. All right, 1 and 1A. Philadelphia, Buffalo. You want to keep Buffalo up top. You don't really believe they lost that game to the Dolphins, which they did. Fine. Okay, you're wrong, but we won't kill you back. If you list Buffalo number one still after losing to the Jets this past week, oh, you will get crushed by yours truly right here on Birds 365. Has to be the Eagles number one team in the National Football League across the board with all the media outlets. So I was just thinking about overall what the Eagles have done through the first 8 games. 8 games, Johnny Mac. How many minutes of football played is that for a team when they've logged 8 games?
8 times 60 minutes. So you got to do the math for me, Jody.
That would be 480 minutes of football played so far this year. Out of the 480 minutes of football that the Eagles have played, how many minutes do you think they've trailed?
Not much. There's the Jacksonville game. I'm going to say 25 minutes.
No, slightly more. 42. Out of 480, they've actually been trailing 42 minutes. That's not a whole hell of a lot. That's less than 10% of the time. Now, some of that is they were tied, and anytime you start a game, you're tied at 0-0. So nobody's going to be leading.
I should have factored that in as well. Right. I didn't factor that in. I mean, well, that's my point with you. They've been so dominant in a league where nobody, they're a good teams. And like I said, I'm not trying to say Buffalo's not a good team. I'm not trying to say Kansas City's not a good team because they are. But everybody in this league has these weeks where they don't play that well. And the Eagles have had those weeks, by the way, where they don't play that well. Houston was one of them. They didn't play that well in Houston. But they just win games easily for the most part. Now, there's a couple at Detroit. They let back in the game. That was disappointing week 1. Arizona is another game they didn't play well. They needed the late drive, and they needed Matt Amendola to shank one to New Mexico. But everybody else has these games, Jody. Not the Eagles for the most part. And
You
that
have
to
these
me,
games that they find ways to lose,
yeah,
like the
yeah,
Bills yesterday against the Jets.
yeah.
They lost that. The Eagles haven't done that once. They're 8-0.
Yeah. And there's something to be said for that.
Yes.
I think. And again, we're in week 10. We're about to enter week 10. Doesn't mean much at this time. And we're already talking about Jordan Davis. The early returns didn't look great, to be honest, without Jordan Davis. I mentioned Avonte Maddox. Injuries can change anything. But they've been the best team. All I can tell you is they've been the best team by far, I think, through 9 weeks. Clear number one. Number one through 9 weeks.
We're not being negative, or at least I'm trying not to be negative. But I think you have to look at everything when you're giving team credit for being 8-0 and calling them the number one team in the National Football League unquestioned, and saying Jalen Hurts is right there for the MVP. Yeah, go ahead, put your hand up. You had Jalen Hurts at the top of the MVP list midway through the season. Yeah, that would be no one in town. But here, in addition to, I'm a little worried about their run defense, sans Jordan Davis, and the couple of running backs they've got coming up over the next few weeks. First Jonathan Taylor, then potentially Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley. They're facing 3 really talented backs in the next 5 games. They've got all 3 of those backs on their to-do list, and we don't know if Jordan Davis is going to be back. So I think that's a legit concern. And the point I was trying to get into about the fact that the Eagles have been front runners. If you're good enough to be a front runner, you should be a front runner. Get out in front, get a lead, protect it, walk off the field with another win. That's what the Eagles have done 8 times so far this year. I gave you how many minutes they're trailing. 480 minutes played so far. 240 of those came in the second half of games. How many minutes have they been trailing in the second half of games?
6.
No.
Well, they were tied in Houston. That was the first time they were not ahead, leading in the second half. So, not a lot.
It would be a goose egg, Johnny Mac. They have not trailed.
I thought we were doing winning. I'm sorry. I was doing the tie thing because they were tied with Houston, and that was the first time they were tied.
No, I'm talking trailing, losing.
Yeah,
they have not trailed for 1 minute in the second half of 8 games this year, which is great, except for one thing, until you have to do it. And then you don't have experience in it, that you don't know what you've done correctly.
Now, there is a criticism for an undefeated team. You're too good to be not ahead in the second half.
I'm just pointing out, as I finished saying,
I'm not.
That's what you should. Everybody should be a front runner. Get in front. Don't let anybody catch you. Hit the wire first. You win the race. They've done it 8 times. Yeah. That should be everybody's goal. But at some point over these next 8 games, to quote Johnny Mac, you have these games. Well, the Eagles might have one of these games, and they may fall behind. They did against Jacksonville in the first half. They had the whole second half to the end of the first half and the entire second half to correct it, which they did. We don't know how they're going to handle somebody making a big play, bounce going against them, defense getting beat. All of a sudden, they look up on the scoreboard when they're down, and it's only 2 minutes to go in the third quarter. They haven't faced that yet this year. I'm not saying they can't do it. I'm not going to say, when it happens, they're doomed for failure. I'm just saying we haven't seen the Eagles face it yet.
No, and you bring up that Jacksonville game, and Nick said something similar to that in the Jacksonville game. It's nice to see that you come back from 14-0, but that's never the plan. And I get why you're saying it. It's nice to see if you come back from, like, what did Minnesota come back from? 10 points in the final 7 minutes. It's nice to see, but you don't want to be in that position. You never want to be in that position. One thing I would say about the Eagles, Detroit, There was a sense of urgency. I've talked about this all year. Arizona, there was a sense of urgency. Every time they've needed a score, they've gotten a score. Not necessarily from behind, but they've had these long clock-sustaining drives. I don't. If you don't have to be behind, I don't want to see you come from behind. But I get what you're saying, and that the thought process in the NFL is you're going to be in that position. And by the way, I don't think the Eagles are going undefeated, so I don't know who's going to beat them, but they're going to lose. And maybe it's because they aren't going to come back late, and people will be worried about it then.
Right. I'll be panicking in the streets that week. Oh my God, they're 12-1.
Yeah.
The sky is falling.
Exactly. So, do you want to be able to do? You want to be able to do everything, and like I said, they're the most well-rounded team in the NFL. That's what makes them the best team. They haven't had to do it. My assumption is they can do it because I don't think people are covering Dallas Goedert when it counts. I don't think people are covering A.J. Brown when it counts. I don't think people are going to figure out the Eagles RPO game when it counts if they can't figure it out when it doesn't count. It all counts. And they're always ahead. And that's a good thing.
And I don't know. I'm 99.9% sure you and I never discussed this because why would we have over the last year and change? When you've got an undefeated team and they lose the game, will benefit from it. It's better to get the loss out of the way now than the continued pressure of being undefeated. Every coach I've ever heard has said that after they lost their first game. It's the biggest BS on the face of the planet. It just is. I'm shocked that they can do it with a straight face when they say it. You don't believe that for a millisecond, do you?
No. I guess there is pressure, but I mean, pressure is part of the gig in the NFL anyway. That's one of the things Jalen Hurts said this week. He's been 8-0 before and lost a national championship. So, it doesn't mean anything. And he has that great sentiment, probably because he went through it so many times at a school where one loss is a national catastrophe. Never mind two, like they have this year. Yeah, I mean, if you go back to New England, when they nearly did it and they went 16-0 and got upset in the Super Bowl, I don't think it affected them. I mean, they just played poorly. They got beat up front. A great catch by a receiver. Sometimes the ball doesn't bounce your way. That's why it's so difficult to win a championship. But people don't want to hear that. Nick Sirianni this week, I was on the plane, but we did his conference call early. But I was reading the transcript and I was talking about turnovers. He won't even admit there's a randomness to turnovers. He's like, no, we can continue this. Coaches don't like to point towards luck or things of that nature, but there's a randomness. I bring up that Minnesota game again, the back judge. You don't think that's random? There's a 50-yard touchdown pass that would have been a sure interception, and the back judge runs into the safety. You don't think that's random? Sometimes things happen. And coaches don't like to admit that.
Understood. And the only group of players, now this is going to be a weird reference, that I think less acknowledges luck than National Football League coaches are professional card players. Do you watch poker on TV, J-Mac?
I did, when that big craze started, but I was out of it pretty quickly.
Okay.
There's only so much you can do.
I do enjoy it. I like to play, and I also will watch it on TV. The professional players, there's no luck involved. It's all skill. That they win or lose because they just know how to play better than everybody else. a crock of crap. There is so much luck involved in the margins. Yes, the better players are going to make the better decisions, and that's why they're over the long haul going to win. But if you, again, can look in the camera with a straight face and go, it has nothing to do with luck, just stop with the bullshit, okay?
Yeah.
There's a lot to do with luck, and there's luck in the National Football League. And to this point, add luck with talent, with good coaching. That's why the Philadelphia Eagles right now. All right, he's Johnny Mac. I'm Jody Mac. Mac and Mac, guys. Going to welcome Rob Motti from the Associated Press into the show. He joins us next here on Birds 365.